Here's the thing about conspiracies, which is the mind control program from the CIA. John Cena in Address, the Kevin Hart interview, where you look at the history of Hollywood. You can look at Bill Gates, who's a massive crook. I just automatically don't trust them.
What do you think of Elon Musk?
The church would utilize to control the peasants. I think it was the FBI. You need to be very skeptical.
What are your thoughts on climate change?
Climate change in general?
Yeah.
I mean, I think climate change is a hoax as a general premise, and I think big institutions utilize it as a form of control. But I think we're getting into the place right now where science and technology is advancing to the point where people might start playing God.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting kind of crazy out there. If you got billions of dollars for research and development, kind of around and start cloud seeding, start doing some crazy stuff with vaccines, and start doing some crazy stuff with experimenting on cloning and all this sorts of weird stuff. Hey, when you're a multi-billionaire, you might have some free time to start playing God.
It's so crazy because even the storms that they had here, the reason why it was so bad was because it was 3 big storms back to back in 24-hour period. Apparently, since the record started 75 years ago, they haven't had this much rainfall in a single day.
I mean, it was wild.
Have you seen that film, Leave the World Behind?
The one that's produced by Barack Obama. Did you know that?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but it's kind of crazy. I heard like the Teslas start self-driving and running into each other, and all sorts of madness takes place. There was another movie that was produced as well called White Noise, I think a year before, about a train in East Palestine, Ohio that gets blown up. And then a couple months later, the train in East Palestine, Ohio blows up. So who knows? Maybe the elites are
like literally
planning a takeover.
I like
just psyoping us.
There was a lot of people who had like mixed thoughts on that film and the ending, but I liked it because I was like, holy shit, this is so real. Like this could.
Have you watched Black Mirror?
Yeah.
So crazy, dude. So crazy.
Like all that stuff we're very close to it.
I mean, we're already in it. You're looking at, ever since COVID kind of took over and biometric scanning for facial recognition is becoming the norm. I think it was 80 or 100 years ago, passports were first introduced into kind of society for travel. Then after 2001, the 9/11 incident, you had the TSA. You know, when you go to the US and you have the TSA, the security checks, it's like it's supposed to be the land of the free and it's supposed to be the land of opportunity, but they pat you down like you're about to enter like some sort of prison.
It's the
craziest shit.
I've been to a lot of places in America. They have the most hostile welcome ever.
It's
like
crazy.
they literally, and I remember when I was younger and I used to get anxious and they would interrogate and be like, what are you doing here? Why are you coming to America?
What do you do for a living?
It's like, I just want to stay here for a week.
I'm just going to Miami, bro. Relax.
Yeah, it's I don't know why they do that. But are you like big into conspiracy theories?
Here's the thing about conspiracies. Most of them end up being true. So whether it's 9/11, which obviously at this point it's a big hoax, and it's been proven that there's been a massive conspiracy towards invading Iraq and Afghanistan and funneling money from taxpayer dollars through the military-industrial complex. That's proven to be true. At the end of the day, a lot of these conspiracy theorists get clowned on the internet, but with enough time and with enough kind of validity, these things end up playing out. Whether you look at COVID, you look at some of these things where you weren't really allowed to talk about it for years and people are like scared about it. A lot of these theses end up being true. So I just observe them and let them play out, and let the bots believe whatever the government wants them to believe. And we just kind of play our own game.
I love it. I always get lost in the YouTube rabbit hole of looking at all these videos. I'm like, I try and pick something to watch and relax my mind before I go to bed. And then before I know it, 3 hours later, I'm just like wide awake thinking, what the f is going on?
There's crazy ones like mkultra, which is the mind control program from the CIA. So you see a lot of elites use mkultra to control celebrities and things of this nature, and it's proven to be true. So if that can be true, where they run some mind control psyop operations on people, maybe everything else could be true as well.
Those humiliation rituals.
100%, bro. John Cena in Address, when he's supposed to be the most jacked stud of the world. Who does that?
Yeah.
Who does that? So yeah, 100% there's humiliation rituals and people are willing to sell themselves for a bag. Pretty disappointing.
It is weird because I sometimes look at these people, I'm like, hang on, how did they go from like being kind of semi-famous, being in a few films or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's like they're everywhere. Like they're hosting these big shows. They're in all the biggest films.
Did you watch the Kevin Hart interview where there was he was interviewing this girl, forget the name, you can run the clip on it. And long story short, it's like, oh yeah, they pay people off, or they pay people off to stay quiet. And then Kevin Hart on the show, he's like, shh, 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 shh. They're listening. Like, okay, who's listening? Whoever that is, they have a lot of control and they have a lot of power. And at the end of the day, whether you look at the history of Disney, whether you look at the history of Hollywood, a lot of these organizations are just psyops to control society. So yeah, that's why I don't watch a ton of movies. Take things with a grain of salt. Don't watch the news. If you look at the news outlets, most of them are controlled by a couple families, a couple billionaires. And most people are just spending all time watching somebody who's reading off of a teleprompter, right? And assuming that that puppet is telling you the truth when it's just merely one narrative.
Have you heard of the, is it the HARP program? Which I think is, I don't know if that's associated with America, but apparently it's something to do with how they can alter the atmosphere to affect weather systems.
Oh,
but that's all very secretive. Nobody really knows how
you can look at. You can look at Bill Gates, who's a massive crook, and he's now pushing something to add haze into the atmosphere to start kind of covering the sun, so that it doesn't cause the planet to warm up. I'm like, okay, so this guy's just playing God now.
It's kind of side crazy, effects bro. Of that.
Yeah.
Do you think there's anybody who is in a very strong position of influence who's actually doing a good job? Like someone you admire who's like, okay, yeah, he's doing a good job. Like he's actually trying to make a positive difference to the world.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one because all you can go off of is perception, and perception is controlled. Right. So whether you're an influencer, that's a small one or a big one, whatever content you put out ends up being how people perceive you. So what if the people that run the world understand how to control that narrative? Anybody that's in a government institution, I just automatically don't trust them, because I don't truly think that we need big government the way that it's being pushed on us. I don't believe in this source of controlled authority over mass amounts of people, and the ones that are like, oh, well, Luke's talking out of his ass, or Luke doesn't understand that you do need government. Well, you've never lived in a situation whereby you've actually had deep levels of freedom. And when I tell people, let's say you were a society that was in slavery, and let's say you're born in year 200 of that 400-year cycle of slavery, you have no concept of freedom. You have no concept whatsoever of what it means to be autonomous. Today, we look at the US dollar built on the fiat system, a massive way to control society by printing money out of thin air and getting people employed. That's why they're called human resources, right? Because you're just an expendable resource for building all these things that are pretty much propped off of debt and off of fiat. It's pretty much slavery, right? And yeah, certain people can get out of it. Certain people can, finesse their way to the top. And like I said, the internet kind of is giving people the opportunity to do that. But most people end up living lives of what I like to call quiet desperation, and they are pretty much slaves to their 9 to 5. They're slaves to the preconceived notions of how one should actually go about making money or building a business. And in my opinion, these are all mechanisms of control to subdue society and control society at mass scale. Keep people broke. In the US, for example, everything's on credit and everything's on debt. Oh, you want to get a house? Okay, perfect. Get a mortgage. Mortgage is a loan. Oh, you want to get a car? Perfect. Here's a car payment. They sell iPhones on payment plans. Everything's on a payment plan. That's all debt. It's all propped up by something that's not real. What's a 30-year mortgage? Imagine getting a 30-year mortgage at the age of 60. What are you going to pay it off when you're 90? It's not real. It's bullshit. So in the 40s and the 50s, when people were working at factories before the dollar was hijacked by the Federal Reserve and removed off of the gold standard, you would work 2, 3, 4, 5 years in a factory, make your $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year, and in 2 years you would buy a house, you would buy a car. You wouldn't have to work 10 years in order to afford a place to live. And that all comes down to the fact that the money printers are the way to steal from people through inflation and through the debasement of currency, which is what we're seeing nowadays. Like I said, unless you understand monetary policy, unless you understand that finance is the new language of the elite, Just like back in the day, Latin used to be the language that the church would utilize to control the peasants. Instead of teaching the peasants Latin, or in this case, the peasants nowadays finance, you would have the Pope or you would have the minister be the one that was the middleman between you and God. And that's why when you look at the US dollar, it says, "In God we trust." It's really funny because you're not trusting in your own ability to decipher what's taking place. You're going off of a middleman. If you look at the tax code, it's 4, 5, 6,000 pages long. Who has time to read that? Who has time to actually understand what's taking place, or if what we're being taxed is legitimate or fair or constitutional or even legal? They don't. So people nowadays are really much trusting off of big organizations, and anything that has an acronym as an organization, whether it starts with an F or whether it starts with a C, all these crazy ones that I'm not going to say just in case we end up being in a bad situation, you need to be very skeptical because you don't know who's behind it. And these centralized sources of authority, whether they start off legitimate, which they truly could, can end up being in a situation that they can get hijacked and compromised. Just like these big social media platforms, they get hijacked from the inside. If you look at Pavel's interview with Tucker Carlson the other day, he talks about how a big government agency, I think it was the FBI, when he went to set up his headquarters in San Francisco, they approached one of his developers to, inside of the Telegram code, to put back doors so that they could get spied on. But this all happened on different social media platforms. So imagine you have all these back doors already set up ahead of time. You hijack developers, insert ghost code, and start managing mass surveillance at a level that hasn't been seen before. It was pretty much introduced in the United States in 2001 after 9/11. It's called the Patriot Act. And it's really such a funny name because they always make it sound super epic, but it's basically a massive surveillance program to control populations. It's very scary. So going back to your initial question, is there any big influencers or influential people at a political scale that I would trust? The answer is no. Because if you're playing in the swamp and you're playing the dirty game, it's going to be a hard one.
What do you think of Elon Musk?
Elon is an interesting character. I think he understands psychology and understands persuasion and understands human nature better than most. I think he's doing a lot of net positive things, but simultaneously, you have to be skeptical at somebody who's utilizing cobalt mines in the middle of Africa, right, in order to power Tesla batteries, and utilizing, children and teenagers and women to get this out of the ground. You also have to look at, for example, Tesla. Tesla is pretty much a surveillance vehicle at this point. It's powered by electricity, which could be turned off at any moment. In fact, in China right now, going back to China, if you have a poor social credit score, you can't charge your Tesla, right? Which is crazy. What happens when that gets introduced in the West and everybody has an electric vehicle? So they'll tell you on one
Do you
side,
think that's why they're pushing electric vehicles so much? Yeah.
because it's a mechanism of control. You have one kill switch, and you can basically turn off all sorts of travel. Think about it. Hey, regulation says you can't leave 5 kilometers from your house. New pandemic, new virus. Oh, well, you don't want to comply? Well, we're tracking through your car. Your car has Wi-Fi. You went 5 kilometers outside of your house. Turn off the car. Boom. And it doesn't even have to come down specifically to one individual like Elon, but this entire premise right now of biometric scans to access the internet is getting pretty dangerous. So I think there's also a net positive, but he really knows how to play people and play both sides of the aisle.
He's always a few steps ahead. He's good.
He's good. He's very good. And that's why he's where he is today.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like I said, I don't trust a lot of people in these high ranks. And that's probably why I haven't been invited to any of these crazy parties. All I know is that there's something weird, right, taking place. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know what exactly it is. All I know is that humanity is very much controlled at a mass scale. And it's definitely controlled by maybe a couple thousand people that really understand how the world really works. And they do it through banking. They do it through social media platforms, and they are being quite effective at it.